I got my phone hole cleaned today.
That's where you keep it? I didn't know we had... Wait, is it a local joint?
That's going on at least
Does
one
that
of the
service?
intros.
No, it was
Do they use natural products? Or
I'm in a silly
is
mood.
it...
Wow.
It's a good time to record a podcast.
Oh. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of From the Middle. From the Middle is a podcast hosted by Dylan Hubble, my brother to my right, Kendall Alala, my buddy in front of me, and myself, Corey Hubble. We're middle-class guys living in the middle of America, in the middle chapters of our lives, with a point of view that's somewhere in the middle. This episode is brought to you by no one, because no one sponsors us yet. But there's a lot of products that we really like, and we're looking at you.
Sounded angry. When do I get to be a brother, by the way?
I think
How does that happen?
you have to... I don't know. I mean, I know how it works, but I don't know if it can work. I guess you could
Must I go back into the womb?
or marry.
So that I could be...
You have to.
I'm already
Anyway,
married.
Welcome to episode 16 of our silly little podcast From the Middle. We are really grateful to all you middlers who are listening, and we really appreciate your patronage and support. And we would appreciate it if you just keep that up and tell a friend, rate and review our show, because it really helps us, and interact with us. We want to hear from you. And I'm doing that at the top of the episode instead of the end, in case you never make it that far. So,
Smart move.
so look for us on
I
all
don't
of
know
our.
that I've ever made it to the end of one.
Look for us on all of your major platforms at From the Mid Pod. You can also email us directly at fromthemiddle@protonmail.com. There's always a link where you could just send in a recording, and we would love to play your recording on the show and possibly react to your questions or your thoughts, something you'd like for us to talk about, and all of the things.
I'm Casey Kasem.
Yeah, that's exactly who I was.
He wrote this song on a napkin back in 1974. It's everybody's favorite hit. I don't know what the title is.
We were having a really fun discussion in episode 15 about pet peeves and just general human being observational humor things that we thought are funny or weird or quirky. And so we're going to keep that going. So if you are listening to this episode 16 before last episode 15, we encourage you to go back and do that first so that you're not left out, because we wouldn't want you to feel left out, because nobody likes to be alone on a bench not knowing what's going on. So go back to 15, listen to that. It's hilarious.
Yeah, basically we whined for a while.
Yeah.
And laughed about the whining.
And if you thought it was mean-spirited, it was.
No.
But in the most... No, I'm just kidding.
Hey,
We're really... Look, we already said in another episode, there's some comedic value in playing some of these things up a
Sure.
little bit. Things that we find mildly annoying and things we all experience as human beings. Sometimes it's funny to talk about out loud on a podcast.
It is funny, and multiple people have made careers out of it. So we're just continuing in that sort of lighthearted and fun vein, and we're going to keep talking about why we think you're all freaks.
so that said, take off your earrings, sit back and relax, put the kids to bed. It's time for the Wine and Shine Hour with Dylan.
Because he still has 37 left.
Yeah.
On his list, and we have a couple each.
What gets your goat, Dylan?
Yeah.
What crumbles your cheese?
Turns out when you are asked to talk about things that annoy you, an hour isn't enough. And this hour might not be either. But I can go ahead and start rolling again.
Keep rolling, my brother.
In true Seinfeld, Sebastian Maniscalco style.
Gil.
That's for Amy. So in the last episode, this is a little more observational on the front end. In the last episode, I talked a little bit about getting groceries in the rain. And now you all know
A
how
little
I feel
bit
about that. I made it as quick as I could. So here's an observation, and then on the very end, I'm going to taper this off to a mild annoyance. So everyone has the family member, probably a parent, that would talk about like, you left the light on in the other room, turn it off. That's racking up the electric bill, right?
Yeah.
So one thing, I don't disagree with that. Fine, don't waste power if you don't need it. But one thing that I find interesting, this whole idea of how wasteful we are with a light that costs you $23 a year to leave on, is how some people will be so strict about something like leaving a light on for an hour that costs you 0.02 of a cent. But will throw away so many leftover foods after a holiday party, after they cook dinner. They'll let things spoil. They'll throw that away. I'm going to fully admit that I was raised in a way that you just didn't waste food, right? Corey, same thing. Like you always tried to eat the leftovers. There was some often left overnight. Hey, we've got 3 days worth of stuff that's built up. Let's try to eat some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's how we grew up. So that was normal. You didn't waste food like that. I do think it's funny that some people are so concerned about 0.02 of a cent on a lamp that's left on, but might throw away $15 worth of produce that's gone bad.
So they don't quantify the things that they choose to be wasteful or frugal about.
Right. They don't. There's no level across all the different parts of their
There's
finances.
no logic involved. It's just something that their parents said to them, and it's
Right.
stuck. So they just keep
Right.
saying it without realizing.
So I'm not being critical of anything that somebody wants to hone in on to be frugal about. However, it's ironic that you won't pay 30 cents more for a 2-liter of Pepsi versus generic soda. But then you get upset, something else you'll be totally wasteful about and flipping about. And really it comes back to everyone has things that they care about, right? Some things that we don't. I tend to not buy generic groceries because to me there's generally more flavor, better flavor, or taste in some of the name brand. I don't think it's purely a name thing. Now, some people will debate things like Aldi's or other brands. You can get great stuff that's cheaper. Awesome. But like to me, I'd rather just have Pepsi than cheap Cola Max or whatever.
Right.
It's worth the extra 30 cents on the 2-liter.
Gotcha.
So anyways, it's kind of an observational thing that
Money bags.
yeah, well, and cut back a lot of other ways so that I can eat the way that I like. All right, it's all relative. We don't leave any lamps on, if you know what I mean.
Taco Bell doesn't grow on trees.
That's
folks.
right. Where I have no problem, like electric bill be darned. I'm going to turn the AC to what I want to set the AC on, and we're going to live like it's an igloo, right?
Yeah.
So like that's a thing that I'm a little bit of a Devo when it comes to my air conditioning. I want it to be nice and cool.
Yep.
So everyone's got their things, but I just think that's funny that the same level isn't applied across all areas. It very quickly people will get upset about really minor things when we're blowing money elsewhere. But throwing away lots of groceries would be something that annoys me. Because for me, I need to try to finish it. That's how I grew up.
Right.
Hey, there's perfectly good food in there. I'll get Taco Bell another day. I got to eat the leftover chicken and noodles.
Yeah.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that one, actually.
Great.
They're fantastic.
Not crazy.
You got another one? Because you're going to have to double or triple up.
Because we can't.
Because-
there's no way we're going to keep up with you
Yeah.
on
Is
this.
skinny jeans on guys still a thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't like that. So you should, if you do that, you should stop it. It doesn't look good. I promise.
That's a reference to something, right? Stop it. Isn't there?
There is.
What is that?
Bob Newhart
Yeah.
was on, I think it was Mad TV. We can fact check this later. And he was a psychologist or a counselor, and people would come into him and say, I have this fear, and it's really weird. I have the idea that I'm going to be buried alive, and I know it's crazy. I don't actually think I'm going to be buried alive, but sometimes the fear of me being buried alive is so crippling that I can't function. And I just don't know what to do. Stop it. What? Stop it. And I can't do Bob Newhart's
Yeah,
delivery.
right.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Stop it.
yeah, it was.
It's like he has a very mild kind of like delivery that's still like that's still matter of fact.
Yeah.
And
so good.
That reminds me. Was it Steve Martin that had a bit on SNL that he's like a financial advisor or something, and people are saying like,
Yeah.
so what if I want to spend more money than I make this month? and it's just him rebuttaling. I can't remember his catchphrase.
Yeah, I
now.
think that no, I think they're saying I want this car, and he's like, "Do you have the money for it?" And they go, "No," and he's like, "Then don't buy it."
Yeah, that's it. And it's like, well, what if I want to spend more than I make on this thing? Don't buy it. And it's just that over and over.
Right,
It's the
yeah,
same.
yeah.
That reminds me of that. That's funny.
That's how Dave Ramsey got all of his ideas.
Yeah, it's
Exactly,
an
yeah.
SNL bit.
do
like,
you have the money for this? No.
Yeah.
Don't buy it.
Yeah.
this is incredible. Let's monetize.
That is hey man, if people followed that rule, tell you what.
That's funny. Does somebody else want to throw in one before I go again?
No, go ahead. You should probably do another one after skinny jeans.
Yeah, seriously, don't do that though. That's not.
Stop it.
Doesn't look good.
And
How do you guys feel about? Okay, well let me back up a little bit. So for the purposes of this of collecting our thoughts around this podcast, we have an ongoing text thread, right? Which makes sense because this is some level of permanence. How do you feel about temporary text threads? So there's a party coming up. Hey everyone, there's 15 people on the text thread.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, we're going to do a party at Jane's house in 3 weeks, 8:00. We're going to have pizza and drinks. We'll see everybody there. And then it turns into this non-permanent, temporary, like, thing that blows up your phone that people could have just not made a text thread. Does that make sense? It's this really long, drawn out, it blows up. This is just an observational thing.
I kind of feel like for the most part in those contexts, you had a situation where one person had to be able to communicate with 15 people right away.
Yeah,
And it was quick and easy for them to do that via text message.
right.
And I feel like that person has a responsibility to clarify how they want responses to them to be handled.
That's
That's
the key.
it.
That's the
it.
thing, because that person basically like say, okay, it made sense that you did a group text because that would take you forever to send this out.
I don't have
right?
everybody's emails.
Yeah, so
Not everyone's on Facebook.
I sent that out to 15 people. I don't need all of you to reply to this message.
yeah.
So unless you have something for the group, such as is anyone else bringing cheese curds?
Right. Group texts bother me when the first person doesn't set the expectation to keep all the responses to a minimum. It's the reply all thing in corporate America.
Yes.
Yeah. You've got the same completely irresponsible group of people that are sending memes back to the whole group. The
And
same guy.
there's always one in the group that doesn't remember that they're that they're replying to the whole group, and they think they're just talking to the original texter.
Yeah.
It's the guy who's going, "Can we stop replying all?"
Yeah.
You just replied. So yeah, the onus is on the first person.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the same guy who just the subject line in their emails is actually the body. of
Is the body. Oh, for
Yeah. Yeah, and I wanted to bring this one up because it's not as annoying to me because I know how to go on my phone and mute a text thread.
right.
But I think we needed to talk about etiquette. So we might be talking a little bit of etiquette on this one, but that's exactly right.
It's still good.
I think people need to realize if you're going to do that, I get it. It's easy. Blast it out. I think you're exactly right. Say, hey, if you have any questions other than the 3 things I just told you that explain everything
Perfectly.
perfectly and succinctly, why don't you just reply back all caps just to me,
That would be sorry.
period. See you guys in 3 weeks.
That'd be such a Dylan thing to say. If you guys have any questions about the 3 things I literally just said, parentheses, and you shouldn't.
Yes.
Yeah.
But somebody shared a great meme the other day that was, I think it was Betsy, who's a friend of the show. Thanks for listening,
Betsy.
She had a great post about like the header was what happens on every Facebook page or community page. And the post is simply, I will be at the corner of X Street and Y Street selling apples. They're gala apples, cash only. I'll be there from this time to this time. And all the responses are like, where are you going to be? What kind of apples do you have? Do you take credit card? Do you take
Hey, what time are you going to be there?
like freaking read.
Yeah.
Read.
Yep.
Hey. If you're going to comment on anything, read it.
Yeah.
Read it.
I feel like there should be an entrance exam
And
for
there's
Facebook.
And I have a uniquely spelled name, for example. There's a certain age group of people on my friends list that on my birthday will say, "Happy birthday, Corey, Corey."
Yep.
It's on it's right there.
You had to click my
literally,
name.
You
and
had a
see it.
notification that said Corey with a K has a birthday
Yeah.
today.
And I really don't care. I find it more funny, and it's always a certain age of person.
Well, ageist. But I feel the
You
same
just
way.
lost some friends.
I feel the
That's right.
same way about
That's what we're
work
doing.
emails. I'm not annoyed by it. It's more amusing than anything else. But you literally had to type my name into the the to line
Before it autofills.
and then you had to and if you're replying back to an email, you hit reply and my name's at the bottom and it's right above where you're typing now.
Yeah.
And you can literally go. And so I've always, as someone whose first and last name always gets spelled wrong, I always try to go back and make sure I read how did they type, how do they write it.
Right.
And it's the same. I think general etiquette is like if somebody says Thomas, but then at the, their email's Thomas dot something at whatever, but then they sign off Tom, you generally call them what they like to be called. So you generally would reply back and say Tom, comma,
Yeah.
yada, yada, yada. I don't get why it's so hard to just not see the name and it's wrong all the time, which is a perfect segue to my next one. Thank you.
Yeah, knock 4 or 5
for
out.
teeing that up. Oh, that's the goal. I feel like
He's ticking these off as he goes.
I
Yes,
literally,
he's like-
I told you in the last episode, I literally made a checklist.
I love this.
So
Yes.
as we could go through them, I
He's literally
tap the
checking
little
them off.
bubble
Yeah.
and it puts a little check mark in
Do
the
you
bubble.
feel better about any of them now?
This is a little cathartic.
Do we
Is
feel
it?
like we're educating the world?
Oh, for sure they're learning something. Yes.
Yeah.
I have a lot of valuable information to share.
No doubt.
And I feel better getting it out
Yep.
to Dad and Ludacris. So,
Longtime friend of the show.
longtime friend of the show, Dad.
Dude, ludicrous.
Hey,
Oh.
Dad gets a lot of shout outs, which he should, but Mom listens, our stepdad listens, our stepmom listens.
That's
they all
right.
listen. So
That's right.
we don't want to.
No, yeah, that was just the joke from the
I
beginning.
know.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, fam.
I mean,
Yeah.
Jay-Z probably too.
So my next one is I feel like I try to use very specific language when I'm trying to communicate something, generally speaking. And so one thing that bothers me is when I feel like I'm being very precise and I'm still instantly misunderstood. So I'll say something like, hey, I heard Tom was looking for somebody to chat with. I might have misunderstood what he said. I think he was saying this, and somebody go, oh, so you're saying Tom was wrong? And I'll say, no, what I said was, I think Tom said this, not that. I was trying to communicate some uncertainty with what I believe Tom said. Now, Tom's
Right.
not a real person. However, it's a good example of I'm trying to use very specific language to make a point and to make sure they also know my level of certainty, my understanding on an issue, my ignorance on an issue, whatever. And people still jump to conclusions very quickly. It's the
Right.
Facebook thing that you said. So it's this idea that I'll be here at this time, this place, this whatever, and people barely even read it. And then they say, so where are you going to be? So what time is it? So you're only going to take cash? Do you feel that way? Like you try to communicate very precisely?
Active listening is a skill that not as many people have as you think have it.
Sure.
To truly actively listen means what we all do is we hear the beginning and we start formulating our response in our head.
Right.
And I'm just waiting for you to stop so I can throw it. Active listening means wait till the end and then sort of filter and synthesize and go, okay, even though I think they didn't say what they meant, what they eventually got to was X, I'm going to respond to X. So active listening is unfortunately, it's an increasingly unique skill, I think. So that's what they're doing. They're hearing the first part and sort of tuning out the rest and getting ready to respond.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I'm with you there on that one too.
My
actually.
robotic
It was-
brain just doesn't understand why they
Yeah.
don't understand.
I can't tell you how many times like I've told other people like you don't understand, like I chose my words carefully as I was saying them, like I meant what I said.
Yeah. I say this often. I'm seldom arbitrary.
Mm-hmm.
I can be silly, but if I've said it, especially if I'm sort of like sharing my feeling about something, or you've hurt my feelings, or you've offended me, you can guarantee I thought about this for a really long time, and I'm using these exact words for this exact reason.
Yeah.
I don't randomly spout. Like, nothing is arbitrary. In my artwork, the same is true. I made those choices in your logo for a reason.
Right.
So when you want me to try these other designs, I'll do it to show you why I think what I ended up choosing was the best option. But there's a reason I put that shape there and this color there. I did it all with thought and intentionality.
Right.
There's very little where I'm just like, let's throw this up at the wall and see what sticks. You might not think that if you listen to the podcast at all. But there really is a lot of thought baked into what I'm saying and doing.
Well, there's a
Doesn't always
challenge there.
happen.
There's a challenge there too, is that and this is where some of these things can get circular, and this is me just kind of like trying to bring that point home a little bit, and to say that you and I, and well, it sounds like all three of us do this, have an assumption that because we know we put thought into what we were saying, or because we know that we put thought into every little inch of that sketch or of that drawing, because we know that, we make an assumption that the person across from us doesn't think it's as good as they should because they don't understand my reasoning. When what's possible is that, and so we attach that like it's better because they don't understand why, and it's possible that they had a different idea that to them could be better, or more close to what they had in mind,
That makes sense.
or that you don't get.
Because they didn't see your flow chart that got you there.
Even if they saw your flow chart, they could still say, I get it, I understand, I still think something else is better.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's me kind of saying that to myself.
Yeah.
Because I do that with language. Like I said, like I chose my words very carefully. I want you to think about what I said because there's the meaning. When the reality, it's like I never thought that like I still could have been wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think one thing that I've realized over time, because I feel like I'm trying to get a point across and I'm trying to be as concise as possible, when I don't get some level of verbal acknowledgement, I assume that it's not understood, and I'll find ways to keep repeating myself differently
Yeah.
until they finally go, okay, I got it. Now, that's to a fault because people get annoyed that I repeat myself. And so I struggle with that, where I'm like, well, I didn't get any level of acknowledgement, so now I've got to say it again and find a different way to say it. And so that's something that I have to try to not do. I have to teach myself to just say it once and leave it, and eventually they'll respond,
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
it does.
So
One of mine is contrarians who are being contrarian for being a contrarian's sake.
Yeah.
Now, there are people who, okay, the example I always give is this. If 10 people loved Ohio State football and you asked all 10 in order, who's your favorite college football team? Who's your favorite, right, down the line? there are people who, if they are the 10th one and all 9 have answered Ohio State, there are some people who will just make up another team, even though their favorite team is actually Ohio State. They will say something else to be the unique one, or they're doing it for being a contrarian's sake. Now, if you happen to like another team, that's awesome, but don't do that. Just like I saw that at art school a lot.
Yeah.
Where it was like, you could argue in some ways that emos were like, oh, all these Abercrombie people, they're wearing all these Abercrombie clothes. They all dress the same. It all looks alike. So we're going to wear black in rebellion to that. You're all wearing the same.
Exactly.
You're all
as much a sellout as the people that you're accusing of selling out.
You're doing the same thing. You're not any more interesting because you've chosen to. So that just bothers me so much, because you're not even doing it with authentic reasons. You're just doing it to appear a certain way, or to put on an air that you're more elevated or evolved or thoughtful. Like, just own the fact that we can all like this thing, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a side story. So there was a kid I went to school with in college at Columbus College of Art Design. The dude dressed like Marilyn Manson, but Marilyn Manson is on a stage performance every single day of art school. He had top hat, spike collar, painted face. It was a full-on elaborate costume that he wore every day. That was his look. On Halloween, he wore like Hollister and jeans.
Yeah.
And it was like the coolest thing ever. I was like, okay, that's actually pretty funny. Like, he just was so quote unquote regular. Anyway, so contrarian. I would say sometimes, Kendall, you're not contrarian for the sake of being contrarian, but when you happen to have a different point of view, you like that. You like that it stirs the pot.
Right.
So to me, there are different levels of that. Like, you don't make that up.
Well, there are times I do, actually. I mean, not on any kind of regular basis, or when I do it, I tell people that I'm doing it.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's especially if it comes to politics, talking politics. Like, I will often just, if there's a view in the room, and I'm not like adamantly for or against their view, which is quite frankly a lot of them.
Often the case, yeah. You don't care enough to actually.
Yeah, I will just automatically like drift away from what like this little groupthink squad over here is talking about, just so that I can be someone that's giving them something to think about, right?
Sure.
And so like I'll do the devil's advocate thing, and I'll usually tell people when I'm doing it.
Right.
But I do have, like, in a lot of political discussions, I do have that tendency of if you're going to talk politics with me, I'm likely going to talk about things that you disagree with. Just
the difference being, you're not changing your actual point of view.
I'm not changing my actual point of view, right?
Yeah. So
because, well, and truth be told, my general point of view with politics is that most people who are talking about them don't know enough about them. So I have that point of view.
Yeah.
There's a pet peeve of mine: people voting and not knowing what they're voting for.
Whew. That brings up this idea I read the other day, that because people were told for so long, the two things you don't discuss in public are politics and religion, we now have the inability to have actual discussion about politics and religion.
Amen.
Because we quit talking about it, so now we don't actually know how to discuss it.
Yeah.
Well, that goes back to what we said in episode 1. Like, civil discourse
Right.
has all but, vanished. Very few people actually want to learn or insert themselves into the thought process and belief system of anyone long enough to actually learn or share ideas. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I mentioned, when you guys asked about how I like the Joe Rogan podcast, I said I purposefully downloaded of episodes from names that I recognize from a variety of backgrounds.
Sure.
Because he's interviewing people in a way that's promoting actual discussion.
Yeah.
And not just, it's the idea of active listening that you already said, not just waiting to respond, but waiting to actually engage on a topic. And so I intentionally downloaded a mixture of people.
Yeah.
Because I think that's important, like to actually understand more of the discussion that's happening, and that long form podcast gives it a place. Not 45-second sound bites, in a political debate.
Exactly.
You know,
And the thing about Joe Rogan is so I had made a comment before, like, so the Bernie Sanders interview, and for people who know me, know that I'm no fan of Bernie Sanders, and so like I had started listening to that podcast, and in the first 5-10 minutes or so, like I had stopped listening to it, and it's the reason why I had stopped, and I had to catch myself, and I went back, but I was like, you know what, it's and because I knew that you were watching or listening to it, and so I was like, I'm going to give it a little bit more of a legitimate shot. And so I went back and I ended up listening to the whole thing. And by the end of it, I wasn't pissed off at Bernie Sanders, which surprised me. and I chalked that up to, like, we talk about that long form thing and versus 45-second stunts, and I think what it was like, it was the first time that I had heard somebody interview Bernie Sanders in a way that Bernie Sanders was just allowed to kind of talk, because the person who was asking the questions didn't have an agenda. The person who was asking the questions
right.
was just actually curious and asking questions from that, instead of trying to either build Bernie up or tear someone else down.
right?
Like, Joe Rogan didn't have either of those motivations. And I feel like every single time I've heard Bernie Sanders speak, it's either been at a campaign rally, which I'm not a giant fan of, most campaign rallies, because they say just all kinds of things, and all they're trying to do is garner a response from a crowd. And so they can't mean half that stuff, because most of it's not doable.
Right.
Or if they are in a media interview, the media outlet that's interviewing them has an agenda. They have a way they want to portray Bernie Sanders, whether it's positive or negative. And I come out of it, and for me, in my opinion, on the media that Bernie Sanders would go on to, like, they had a clear agenda, in my opinion, that was against what I was thinking. I watched Joe Rogan, a guy who doesn't have that agenda, and I listened to Bernie Sanders talk, and I'm like, I don't hate him. I mean, to be clear, he represents pretty much all of the ideas that I think are bad for this country. So I don't agree with Bernie Sanders on virtually anything, policy-wise, even still. But I was able to listen to Bernie Sanders talk and be like, I could actually sit in a room with this guy and talk to him and disagree and be okay with it.
Well, and they talked about it in an episode, and he said, like, in a debate forum, for example, somebody asks a massively complex question, I get 12 seconds to answer.
Right.
In the format of the Joe Rogan podcast, he fully fleshed out and explained, like, take one criticism of him, for example. Who's going to pay for all this free college and all this, right? He explained, okay, there would be a tax, and it would be on Wall Street speculation. It'd be less than 0.5% tax. And whether you agree with that or not is not the point. The point is, he says free college for everyone and debt forgiveness, and every conservative just flares up, right? But when you actually let the man, and again, this is not about whether you agree or disagree, but when you let him sit and explain and fully flesh out the idea, you're like, oh, it's like a thought out.
Yeah, which I assumed it was for. Like I said, I don't agree with it any more than I did before.
Right.
I still think it's a dangerous idea.
Right.
But
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Or
Yeah.
Or like his comment about debates, like, I agreed with. I was like, yeah, that you're exactly right. That I think the presidential debates, as we see them on TV right now, are a terrible format. I think long form is the way to go. What I disagree with is when you start saying that the state should be able to pass legislation to tell networks how to run a debate on their own television station.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I disagree with.
Yeah, and that's fine. We're not, my question wasn't necessarily meant to deep dive into the actual issues themselves, but I think what we're really highlighting is it's important to actually, don't read the clickbait article title, right? Don't read the comment section. Why don't you actually go watch the clip and watch the full clip of the thing that the person said? Make sure if the clip is short that you know what they said before and after the clip. Find a news source that's telling you the full explanation and not taking a soundbite from a Republican or Democrat or Libertarian or Green Party candidate. Actually get the whole context of what was said, or try to get a full explanation of the policies that these people are talking about.
Yeah.
Because things can easily be taken out of context and used as clickbait, just trash news articles that people share.
Yeah.
And certain generations are far more likely to share fake news that everyone likes talking about than others. And so we need to be really careful about how we're ingesting these political ideologies, where they're coming from, making sure we understand context. And there's all these things that swirl around it. So don't just live off of, and like you said, the people who talk about it the most frequently know the least. Don't just go off of a title of an article or a snippet. Try to get the full story.
But
Try
see,
to find a place.
That still presumes that someone's actually interested in learning.
They're not. No, we're talking to the people who want to learn.
So many people just want support for their own belief system and to subscribe to their echo chamber. And I just want somebody to say what I align to. You're presuming people actually want to learn and see the other side, and that's a gigantic assumption today.
And to
unfortunately,
yeah, you're absolutely right. To be clear, I think we're talking to, this is called From the Middle podcast, right?
Yeah.
So we're specifically targeting a type of people that are willing to be a little uncomfortable and want to learn, and this is for a certain group.
yeah,
If this was called From the Far Left or From the Far Right, we should know our audience, and that's not who we're talking to, right? So, yes, this is for people who are willing to say, there's a chance that I might be wrong about this person, this political party, this political ideology, and maybe I need to do a little more research, more in more places than just the place that I normally get my news dumped to me through one site.
Yeah.
That's who we're really
That's a
talking
good place
to.
to be, I think. When it comes to politics, for me personally, if I can get a point where I know like the far left progressives think that I'm like an uber conservative, and if I can get like the far right wing folks to think that like I'm not anywhere close to where they
Rhino.
are. Yeah, like I feel like I'm in a comfortable spot when
I totally agree
yeah.
with
when
that.
I'm there.
The key there is, if we're talking to the people that want to live in the middle, the key there is inform yourself and then go vote.
Yes.
Moderates don't like to vote because they're tired of hearing everything come from both sides. So yeah, sorry if this took this down a path that we
that's
weren't
okay.
planning on.
Yeah,
but-
let's do a funny one.
yeah. Well, you go ahead.
No, you got more than I do. I think
Let's
I'm
see.
out.
Yeah, I'm trying to find. I don't think
Kendall,
I have
you
a
got to
fun-
have more.
Well, I have more. I don't have any funny ones. How about this one's not funny, but I'll go. Being late is one of mine. I'm not a fan of late people who are late all the time.
What's your willingness like to forgive? Is that like a couple minutes is fine, or I'm never late, so I can't relate
No,
to
yeah,
the
I mean,
type
I
of
guess-
terrible people they are.
I guess I'd say within 5 minutes, and I'm probably not giving it a second thought. More than that, and I'm thinking, well, we could have just scheduled it later. And then if it gets and I'm talking like if it's a chronic problem, I recognize that stuff happens. That's
Sure,
unavoidable.
absolutely.
Like it's not. I've been late before, obviously, but it's and I've kind of narrowed it down to like it's not necessarily just the being late part that gets to me. It's it was avoidable that gets to me. It was the like, well, I was going to get ready to go, but then I saw these 4 other things that I needed to do and get done that I could have done later, but decided not to. And that's why I'm late.
Because it was a value choice.
Yeah, because it was a value choice, or you're just, again, we talked about being considerate. It just wasn't.
Right, that's what I mean. They don't think it was a value choice, but you chose those 4
Yes.
things over being respectful to me.
Right. Yeah.
Or this event or this other group of people that are here ready to practice for church tomorrow.
Right. Yeah. So
Like,
so being late is a thing of mine. Like I always try to be on time. My wife is one who like wants to walk in like at the time, which I'm perfectly cool with, but I'm so weird about it that it's like, okay, but I want to be sitting in the parking lot at
yeah,
least 10 minutes
100%.
before.
I'd
Yeah.
rather be an hour early than a minute late.
Like I want to you don't understand. It's like, yeah, like this is me having that conversation with her. It's like we both want to be there on time, but I want to make sure we're there on time.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, if we're driving any more than 15 minutes, I want to make sure we've got a half hour to get there, because who knows what's going to happen. If we're stuck in traffic, I don't
People
want that to
driving
be my
slow
excuse.
in the left lane.
I want people driving slow in the left lane. If someone's driving slow me in the left lane, I want to be able to say to myself, you know what? I'm not rushed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. When my wife and I both are like you, we really, really want to be early. And when our daughter came along, I don't know how long, it would normally take us a little over an hour for both of us to get ready, from like wake up to need to be ready to leave, having eaten and showered and all those things. And so when our daughter came along, if it normally took us an hour, 10 hour and 15 minutes for both of us to get ready, we knew that because we always wanted to be ready to get wherever we were going.
Yeah.
We had figured out that
You have
time.
timed it and you had it down. Yeah.
I instantly just went to, let's just go straight to 2 hours. So for the longest time, when our daughter was newborn, it was 2 hours before we need to be anywhere. We need to get up, or we need to start getting ready. Like 2 hours is the minimum that we need. And that probably feels like overkill, but we didn't have a single anything that we missed, even with our daughter being young, like as a baby, and unexpected, diaper changes and meals. And that was never an issue because we always planned enough time, because that's important to us. And I think ultimately that's what it is. If the people or the places that you're going are important to you, you need to try to be there on time to be respectful.
Sure.
But again, that's just how we were raised. I know some people, it's a very casual thing. They don't view it that seriously.
Yeah.
They're not looking at it like, oh, I don't want to be respectful of you, so I'm not going to be there on time. I think it's often that, well, it's not a big deal, because I had
Right.
other things going on. It's not meant to be a personal attack. It's just that I was doing X, Y, Z. So,
Right.
yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. I guess I'd like to hear from, like, maybe the listeners a little bit. Like, is a couple minutes late always acceptable? Or is it like, no, you always need to be on time? Or like, I don't know. This is not going to be one of those where I'm, speaking from the centrist view. Like, I already know that I'm definitely I want to be there early,
Yeah.
in the parking lot 20 minutes early
Yeah.
kind of person.
Which, I mean, could be, and this is where my wife balances me out quite a bit, because like I would be that crazy that like I'm okay. I've got my cell phone. Like I can kill an hour in a parking lot. Like there's almost no limit to how neurotic I am about some things. And then my wife comes in and balances some of that out. And it's like she's not at all like what's the word I'm looking for? She's not at all the aloof, we'll get there when we get there, or whatever, it doesn't matter kind of person.
Sure.
She is still very much I want to be there on time person.
Yeah.
She's just less crazy about it.
Yeah, because then you see the memes that go around like, don't stifle your kids' creativity. If you're running late, no big deal. Like, play with the cereal, paint your picture, read your book. Don't stifle your children and your relationship with them. And I'm like, yeah, that's not wrong, but is that one or the other?
Yeah, exactly.
Can you do some of that most of the time, and then the other times just make sure you're on time? I don't know. It feels like it's painted into this. You have to choose one or the other. Like, you're either a bad parent because you rush everywhere, or you're a good parent because my house is a mess because I love my kid more.
Oh my goodness.
It's just,
So I've been over here deliberating, like, do I go there? Because I have one that's like a parenting thing.
yeah,
But it is very polarizing.
yeah.
There isn't one. Just the
There's
general.
something I hope it is.
I don't even have one in mind. I'm just saying.
Oh, really?
The idea of parenting is very, what works for you, and so it's highly preferential in what you do. But when you're on one when you lean towards one side and you're around parents that are very the other,
Yeah.
that's a challenging social situation to be in
Mm-hmm.
because you're like, oh God, they're creating their own chaos that they're complaining about, but who am I can't say like, but
Yeah.
okay, so I'll just a social setting where kids are just going absolutely ape.
Right.
And I'm painting a character story here, okay? Where you've got this sort of like loosey goosey, like, oh, that's Billy. He's just a free spirit, and yeah, he rips all the tablecloths off of tables. It's just this funny thing he does, and I think it's because like there's like some basic core tenets of like courtesy and decency, and like when your child is screaming and driving remote control cars in a funeral setting, maybe you don't let them.
Yeah.
And I watched this play out. So just a quick story. Once I was at a Starbucks and I was sitting outside on the patio area, which is right by the parking lot. And this old station wagon pulls up, and I just hear loud noise in the car before anyone has even gotten out. And a very hipster mom gets out of the car with long flowing dress and flowers in her hair. The car reeked of patchouli, and
Yeah.
just like you could smell the essential oils spilling out of the car.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a 5, 6, 7-year-old girl screaming, "You're an idiot. I hate you. You're the worst mom ever." Just screaming. And the mom's like, "Stacy, stop it." And was just doing the whole ultra passive. And I so badly wanted to be like, how's that working out for you?
Yeah.
And the girl was yelling because she wanted the passcode to the device, but the mom was trying to keep the device away from the child as a form of punishment.
Yeah.
And there was never a raised voice, and there was never, but this kid got to the point where she was kicking her mother, kicking her. And the mom was just like, "Oh, Stacy." And I'm just like,
Oh, jeez.
Yikes.
and it was so, I'm not exaggerating at all. In fact, there are core details that I'm probably leaving out, but I just watched this play out. Finally, a boyfriend or dad or whoever gets out of the car and puts his head on his arms on the hood in just total like defeat. Like, this is our life.
Yeah.
And I'm just, oh, that little devil on my shoulder wanted to be like, just walk up and go, how's that working out for you? Is that working?
Mm-hmm.
And that's you hit the nail on the head, because it's anything remotely parenting related is highly debatable.
Oh man.
Yep.
And I'm not saying it should be. There's probably some pretty firm rules in there, but it's discussed as though there are no rules and everyone's right. And if I chose it for my kid, then it's right.
Yeah.
And if it worked for your kid, but then it doesn't have to work for mine, because, and I'm sure my wife and I have done things that other parents have looked at us and gone, "You're crazy."
Oh, 100%.
You're
For us
great.
too. I mean,
Everyone told us to do a sleep machine. We just chose not to do it. We just decided not to. Parents think we're nuts. There's been did you try? Did you try? Did you try? We go, "No, we're just not going to. No, we're just not." It's not wrong. I mean, that's literally a decision
Right,
thing.
yeah.
This isn't discipline. But even little examples of like, you guys are nuts for not doing
Yeah.
that.
Or potty training and like,
Highly debatable
oh
stuff.
my goodness. Wait until they're ready. Versus diaper-free baby.
Yeah.
I think the part where it bothers me is when you want the result of one thing, but you aren't willing or disagree with that thing and then complain that you don't get the benefit of applying that
Sure,
set
yeah.
of principles or whatever, right? So like, yeah, just don't, you lose the right to be upset then, right? Like the people who are like, "Oh, my kids just won't go to bed. They won't go to bed when I tell them to go to bed." And then every time the kid gets out of bed at night, they let him watch a little more TV. They give him some ice cream because the adults are now having ice cream when they're Netflix and chilling. So they give him some of their ice cream.
Right.
and they snuggle with their kids for a little bit, and then they let them sleep in their bed with them.
Mm-hmm.
But then you lose the right to complain. Then that's fine. That's fine if you want to do, especially if like this is our last child. We're never going to have any more.
Right.
For sure. Enjoy that time. If your kid comes out that's awesome. You just don't get to complain that they don't go to bed when you put them to bed. That's it. That's all. That's
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
So
Well, or at least not be surprised.
yeah,
You know, it's, and this is a semantic thing. It's right up there with people saying like, if you don't vote, you don't have a voice. If you don't vote, you can't complain. I'm like, I mean, sure, yeah, you do. You can still complain. It's fine.
you can.
That's fine with me. No, seriously, it's fine with me. I
Yeah.
don't have a problem with people choosing to not vote and then still having an opinion on politics. I'm okay with that. I
Yeah.
think that is more responsible than the other.
Right.
Anyway.
Blindly voting.
Yes.
Do you have any more, Dylan? Before I wanted to put a little. We promised that we'd put a little
Yeah.
thoughtful bow on this at the end.
Oh yeah.
This is good. I think some of mine aren't going to be as lighthearted. So we
Because
might
they've all been so lighthearted.
we
so
might
far.
have polarized the listeners enough.
have,
but,
yeah.
This
We've
one is
created
funny.
a lot of different arguments today.
Oh
is what
yeah,
we've done.
for sure. We were covering all the different sides, not just the middle. This is just a funny one. Have you ever noticed anybody like almost everyone turns off read receipts on their phone, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So read receipts. It's when you send a text instead of just saying delivered that it sent to them, it actually says it was read and what time. That's called read receipts.
Right.
If you're somebody, this is more a tip than anything else. If you're somebody who's bad at responding to texts, which by the way shouldn't really exist in the world, you always have something on you, so you just don't want to reply. But if you're bad at sending texts, please turn off read receipts because it makes you look way worse. As an example, if I send a text to somebody who has their read receipts turned on and say, "Hey, are you free next Thursday?" and it says read, couple hours is reasonable. Day or two might even be reasonable. 6 days later, when I know that you read it 2 minutes after I sent it, makes you look pretty bad. You can't even lie and say that you never saw it. I literally have proof that you did. So just be aware. I think most people caught on to that pretty quickly with texting and turn that off.
You'd be surprised.
But you'd be surprised how many people leave that on
Yeah.
and then just flippantly claim they're bad at, "Oh, I'm just so bad at responding to texts." Well, get rid of your phone then.
Jeez.
You own it. And there's we've all kind of decided as a group 1 to 2 days is pretty reasonable to respond to a text. Anything past that, especially if you have read receipts on, is insane. So that's advice more than anything else.
That's funny.
I may be off center, but I
We're
was
making the world better one step at a time.
One social issue at a time.
nobody's gonna be my friend after they hear these episodes.
That's funny.
It was advice. Doesn't make me mad. Just advice.
Do you have it? Do you have any more?
Oh, probably.
Any more good ones?
Yeah. This is another observation that I'm not sure you guys can either agree or disagree. And we don't even have to get into the politics behind it, but just you can sort of agree or say, no, I don't. Does it seem like the people that say, "I only want to buy American," are the ones most likely to shop from Walmart and Amazon, where everything's from China? I don't know. That just feels true. Every time I hear that statement made, "I only want to buy American," on their way into Walmart. It just feels like a thing. I didn't know if anybody else's.
Good point. That's a good point.
Everything from Walmart and Amazon is from China.
That turns into not necessarily political, but that's a very that can turn into a very messy discussion very quickly.
yeah. That's
Because-
why you can just.
Well, by messy I mean like complicated. Like I only buy American. Well, okay, so you walk into Walmart, you become one of their shoppers, and so that means that you have now supported every single one of those employees,
Yeah.
regardless of where the products came from.
Yeah, but
And even then, you have distributors.
we all know that's not what they're
But
saying.
we all know
though.
that's not what they're
That's
saying.
not what they're
Yeah.
saying. It's I want a product that was manufactured, assembled, whatever
Yeah.
in the United States, and that's not what
When you
referring
say
to.
that, like the first industry that comes to mind is the auto industry,
Yeah.
and And like I think to myself, when I hear people say that around here, I'm like, if you want to shop as local as you can for a car around here, that means you buy a Honda.
Yeah.
That's how you can support the most people in Central Ohio.
Right.
Is to buy a Honda.
Yeah.
But that goes back to, which to me is the bigger core issue there, which is you actually just like being more vocal about your opinion
right.
than you actually walk out with your dollars. And like that goes back to that, just
Right,
like you're just trying to.
Yeah, because I think if you want to buy an all American stuff, Homage sells really nice T-shirts that I think are made in the U.S. and it's all Columbus operations, whatever. Yeah, they're like $35 or $45, but that's what that means. That's what that looks like.
Right.
You know, there's somebody making for an Amish country. You know, they're making furniture, and they're cutting the wood and they're assembling it. But that's what that actually looks like when people say that. That's what that should be. So I just find it interesting. It's really, I think it boils down to, it's a great in theory. It's a thing you can say that you think says something about you.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you don't want to actually have to do anything about it.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I want to make a point. I don't actually mean the words that I'm saying.
Sure. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And so,
Because it sounds cool to have this point in this opinion.
Yeah. Because I want to save, at the end of the day, what I really care about is saving money.
Yep.
Or bang for my buck. I want as much food for as cheap
Yeah.
as possible.
Which is fine. Just say that.
Just say that. Or
Yeah.
don't say anything.
Or or you didn't have to talk about it at all.
Yeah, you could not make that point, but it's so often that I hear that and I'm like, I almost approach it with genuine curiosity. Oh, that's really interesting. So what do you actively do to support exclusively American made products and services? Very rarely any type of actual response to
Right.
that, you know. And so it's an observation. If you think I'm way off base, come tell me. I'd love to hear of all the cool American brands people buy from. So then when I need something and want to see what's available in America, I know where to look.
There you go.
So
That's good.
Corey, make us all feel bad about ourselves.
No, so this is something that, as promised, I wanted to try to make sense of this, and it was something that I heard that was profound to me. That I was like, whoa, to the point that when a buddy of mine and I were in the car on a road trip, I said, you got to listen to this. So, Dax Shepard is a comedian and actor who has his own podcast called The Armchair Expert. And it's just that. He's not an expert, but he's just sort of like weighing in on what makes people tick and sort of their backgrounds, and he has on celebrity guests. Dax is married to Kristen Bell. Kristen Bell is a actor, comedian. She's in the voice of Anna in Frozen, and she's in The Good Place. And if you've seen her picture, she's adorable. It's Kristen Bell. So I don't really follow celebrity stuff a lot, but they're like one of the cutest, most annoyingly cute celebrity couples. Okay, so Dax had Kristen on his podcast, and he was talking about something called behavior attribution error. And I'm going to read the definition, and then I'm just going to read a little bit of their conversation after that. Not much, just a few quotes back and forth, and then I want you guys to weigh in, because this will, I think, inform everything we've talked about in the last 2 episodes about pet peeves and human observation. So here's the definition. As a sample example of the behavior attribution error theory seeks to explain, consider the situation where Alice, a driver, is cut off in traffic by Bob. Alice attributes Bob's behavior to his fundamental personality. He thinks only of himself. He is selfish. He is a jerk. He is an unskilled driver. She does not think it is situational. He's going to miss a flight. His wife is giving birth at the hospital. His daughter is convulsing at school. Consider, too, the situation where Alice makes the same mistake and excuses herself by saying she was influenced by situational causes. I am late for my job interview. I must pick up my son for his dentist appointment. She does not think she has a flaw in her internal characteristics, e.g., I am a jerk, I treat others in contempt, I am bad at driving. So then Dax says, I think this so perfectly sums up the way you and I move through planet Earth, where when you get cut off in traffic, he's talking to Kristen, you generally think that person was in a situation that kind of caused them to do that. Is that accurate? She says, yeah. There are still times I question it and say, was that person a jerk? But it still doesn't make me very angry because at that point I just go, how sad for them. So this is Dax's sort of realization. He said, well, here's the crazy breakthrough I had. I didn't think that behavioral error thing even got deep enough. So here's what I then thought of later. I said, oh my gosh, that's Kristen and I. You give people the benefit of the doubt. You assume that they needed to do that thing. And I immediately go, that person's an entitled a-hole who doesn't want to wait. And it has now occurred to me that the reason I can so quickly ascribe an intention to that person is because I myself have that intention very often. I'm an entitled a-hole who hates to wait. So I cut people off many times to get ahead and not wait my turn. So it's quite easy for me to think, for me to believe that people around me are as equally as crappy as I am. I'm changing a lot of his language because I don't think I'm a monster. I think I'm human. And in this big rat cage with everyone else, I'm just trying to get fed. So all this really says about either of us is that you actually don't cut people off in a hurry. Is that right? She says, yeah, I'm a very bad driver, so I don't even know how to cut someone off. Like, I wouldn't even know how and when to accelerate. And then Dax goes, but you're not a bad walker. And if you were to be approaching a supermarket checkout line and you notice that you were equidistant to the line as someone else, you wouldn't pick up your pace to beat them. And she goes, no, absolutely not. I would surrender to the other person just out of like manners. And here's the last thing. So Dax says, yes. And I 100% would pick up my pace a little bit. And so what my breakthrough was, your view of the world is strongly impacted by how you're moving through it. I'll say that again. Your view of the world is strongly impacted by how you're moving through it. And that the way that you could potentially solve all your problems is just to be a conscientious, patient person who is benevolent. Because weirdly, downstream, that's how you will end up seeing the world. The crazy benefit from his way of doing things is that he gets somewhere 17 seconds faster. That's his big reward. But he had 45 minutes of anger while he was getting his 17-second reward where everyone was out to cut his throat. So he had an hour of misery to get the 17 seconds. And Kristen, she takes a big hit. She's going to be 17 seconds later. But the whole ride was pleasurable.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, whoa. So because a lot of mine were like people who are inconsiderate, who think they're the center of their universe.
Yeah.
I'm like, is that something that I'm attributing to their behavior so quickly? Because even if I generally think I'd never be the guy hanging out in the left lane, going 5 miles an hour under the speed limit, I'd never be the guy walking down the parking lot aisle so that no cars could get past. Even though I wouldn't do those more glaringly obvious things, are there ways that I do that subconsciously that make me, that I'm so quick to recognize that in somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts?
I often have that exact same thought, and as we were talking beforehand, I even mentioned that like when I have critical discussions with people, I very often point out to them that like the only reason why I think you're thinking about this wrong or incorrect, or the only reason why I think you have this underlying sin going on, is because I too have it, and so therefore I see it, and so I didn't point that out at all in our thing because I knew that we were having this moment.
Yeah.
And I think that there's, I mean, I'm not going to go ahead and make the blanket statement that that's everyone's experience, but that's certainly my experience, is that the things that tend to bother me the most, the things that tend to stand out to me negatively the most about other people are things that I have dealt with before, and probably most of the time are things that I am still dealing with. And so like that's, I think that there's there's a lot of truth to what he was saying, at least to how it pertains to me. And even more specifically, it's that recognition of it. It's I recognize it because I'm screwed up.
Yeah. Your thoughts, Dylan?
Yeah, it's kind of funny that I love that we're ending this way after a couple episodes of doing what we did, right? So like we got deep into some issues and we were talking about things that annoy us and bother us, but as comedic as that can be, I think there's a couple like things that thoughts I sort of tied to what you were saying. This idea that there's sort of lion and sheep in the world, right? You're one of two people. You're either the sheep is the more passive and the lion is the more aggressive. But then there's also this idea that we tend to see the best in ourselves and the worst in other people at the same time. And so I mean, it definitely makes sense. It's weird sort of applying this to myself live as we're discussing it out loud, because all of a sudden I'm not being, really thoughtful about the words I'm choosing, right? But no, I think there's a lot of truth in that. I mean, if you feel insecure and jaded and like you always need to make the ambitious move because nobody else is going to look out for you, and you feel like you need to put yourself first because nobody else will, that's what you're going to see in other people. You're going to assume that intent about their actions because it's a little bit of it. We talked about this earlier. It's not projecting, but there might be a little bit of that, thrown into the mix here. If that's how I have to operate to feel like I need to make it through life, then I assume that's how other people operate. And I'm not saying that's true for me. I don't feel that way. I think at the end of the day, a lot of us are just hurt by a lot of things in life. We all just want to feel loved and accepted, and we all operate out of a lot of insecurity, and we're all trying to do our best to be confident. And so I think that's why I try to assume positive intent with people and give them the benefit of the doubt. At the end of the day, they're probably a lot like everybody else. Everyone's kind of hurt, scared, trying to act like an adult and keep it all together.
Right.
And so I think people need lots of latitude. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't give others latitude.
Right.
It's really deep. It's really interesting. I'm certainly not going to figure it out. Those are just some things that kind of popped into my head as you were talking about it.
So I've listened to it like 3 or 4 times, and then I wrote it down once so that I could read it back to you guys. And a couple things strike me. So the first is like, well, some of that's like, duh. Some of that's just like, be nice. And some would call it karma or whatever. And then some of it is like really deep and psychological. And I'm sure that there's like medical books that have better definitions of it than behavior attribution error and things like that. But they later go on to say in that episode that Dax's upbringing was very unstable. He had a lot of stepdads. It was dog eat dog. They were very poor. Like Kristen grew up in a very secure home so like for sure there's hardwiring and all of that. But if we're all trying to, and I hope we are, I mean, there's a saying, nature never stagnates. Either you're growing or you're dying. I hope that we're all trying to still learn and be coachable and teachable and work on the sticky outy parts of ourselves. And so I think it's a practice thing. Like if even for me, like the annoying people at the airport, like if I can try to go, okay, let me have some empathy. It's her first time. Let me just assume all of the variables that would give me more empathy for that person. Right. It's her first time flying. Her child is sick on the other end of where she's traveling to, so she's got a heightened sense of stress. She just read an article about a plane crash. I'm just going to assume all those things that probably aren't too true, but like, okay, maybe I can have a little more grace for this person who's adding an undue level of stress to the boarding process, right? And I don't want to be the wet blanket on this like funny, like Sebastian Maniscalco conversation we had about why people are silly. But I do think that one thing that we try to do on this podcast is like try to take all those conversations and boil it down to some things that we can learn, that we can consider about the other side, that we can take away and go, that's a nugget that I'm just going to chew on for a little bit and see, is that something that applies to me, and can I maybe alter the way that I'm currently moving through the world so that I can view it as a generally better place?
Yeah. Well, and here's a third side to that. Is that what if you didn't even feel the need to try to justify the behavior at all? What if the lady at the airport had none of those other things and you didn't have to make any of those assumptions? She was actually being entitled, feeling entitled. Can there's another side to like can we get to a point where we can look at that and still empathize with it and say, you know what, I have had an entitled attitude from time to time too, or I know people who do, and this is a person who in a different way needs friends and needs helped and needs some grace given. And I mean, yeah, sure, maybe they need to be knocked down a few pegs here and there, and that kind of thing. But like that's I think that the way you take this a step further is when you can get to a point where you don't necessarily even care what the answer is to those assumptive questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I would certainly love to be there. It's baby steps, brother.
Yeah, no, I know, no. But that's what I'm saying. Like
Yeah. No, you're absolutely
when
right.
you can look at the world
I love that.
and just see people.
Yep.
People who struggle, generally speaking, the same way you do,
Or in different ways that you do.
in different ways that you do. But when I say the same way you do, I mean that people who struggle because they're screwed up,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and you're screwed up, and we're all screwed up. So let's just recognize the fact that we all have crap, and we're trying to carry it, and we drop it sometimes.
Well said, sir.
And
And I don't know, that might even be like, because some of this is even bigger than my mind has explored for sure. Like some of this might even be a path. Like maybe this starts out by somebody just looking like, what's the difference between even the words sympathy and empathy?
right,
Because those are different, and maybe learning those and exercising those, and that eventually you quit trying to put yourself in other people's potential shoes and you just start accepting the world as it is.
yeah,
And I don't know, maybe that's a path. Maybe it's not just jump to the end. Maybe
right.
I think people need to start like understand the difference between sympathy and empathy and how it applies in a situation, and start with those. And that's something that I know that I could do better. Like I try to at least go through the mental exercise of what are possible reasons for this person acting this way that might help me understand and relate to their situation, so that I might be able to be kinder or more understanding or show more grace or whatever towards them. So I don't know that that's a path, but maybe for some people that is. Maybe that's how some of us get there.
Yeah.
is-
No, I think for a lot of people, that the understanding grace is important. Understanding the concept of grace and mercy, of withholding punishment that one deserves, or giving them something that they don't deserve. That is such a foreign concept.
Yeah.
When it comes to human interaction for a lot of people.
Because it's very transactional and it's very like tit for tat, and it's sort of like everything's quantified as, so the idea that I could be offended and just, that's okay.
Yeah,
And I don't need to retaliate or respond or defend or flare up
exactly.
but it's certainly not as fun to talk about.
Right.
Right. No, it's
No,
still,
it's good, 'cause
it's
I-
still cool and fun to laugh at.
Yeah.
At the world, to laugh at ourselves as we're a part of it.
Yeah, I think the world relates to being frustrated, right?
Right.
And we got to share that side. But I think this is the important bow on top of the ugly package that is all of our
Exactly. Yeah.
all of our nasty humanness.
Yeah.
You
There's,
know?
there's plenty of chaos to look at. It doesn't do us any good to turn our eyes from it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's fun. I see. I love. Again, I say this all the time. I love think of it like a zoom. We can zoom in on stuff and see it for just what it is in that moment, living it out and silly and comedic, and then pull back. And then so that aperture, I think that's the correct term, like where we're zooming in and out and trying our best to have a well-rounded discussion and not let it just linger in one layer and stay there, right? I think that's fun.
Yeah.
I hope people enjoy that, and that we can laugh together, and that we can go, wow, you know what? As crazy as those guys are, that's a nugget that I can take and sort of chew on, and maybe just changes how I view the world or how I treat somebody tomorrow at Starbucks. So fun, guys. Any other thoughts?
I'm good.
Dylan, shut it down.
All right, everybody. Well, you know the drill. Get on all our social media platforms, like, comment, share, tell us we're idiots and all the reasons why we're wrong after 2 episodes worth of complaining. Or if you happen to stick around for the last few minutes, tell us that we might be remotely insightful.
Punching gloves are on.
Look, yeah,
We're big boys. We can handle it.
absolutely. We're going to
Bring
be
it.
fine.
Bring it
So go ahead and do the thing that you do with all the social media platforms. We really genuinely enjoy the feedback. I think some people are kind of timid. Like, I don't know if I have anything interesting to share. So I didn't want to comment, or I didn't. Look, this has been however many episodes of nothing interesting to share. So you can certainly at least comment and tell us what you've enjoyed, what you've not enjoyed, post questions, answer a poll, follow us, whatever. So thank you guys so much for listening. We really appreciate it. Definitely check out the next episode. I think we're going to have some fun there too. And we will talk to you soon. Out.